Just south of downtown, trains on Pittsburgh's light rail pass through a tunnel under Mount Washington, which provides them a quick link to the city's south and points beyond. But occasionally, this tunnel needs repairs. Rather than closing down the service when this happens, the light rail actually has a whole other way to get over Mount Washington, a former streetcar line called the Allentown branch, which takes a much longer street-level route over the mountain. PRT keeps it in working order despite not seeing regular service. And tonight, the line is operating, so let's head down to Steel Plaza and go for a ride. We begin on the Panhandle Bridge, a former Pennsylvania Railroad bridge that carried passenger and mail trains from Pittsburgh Penn Station to points south. The last heavy train to use this bridge was the Amtrak National Limited in 1979. Funnily enough, the National Limited also ran through a tunnel in downtown St. Louis, which is currently being used by that city's Metrolink. 6 years after the bridge's closure to heavy passenger trains, it became host to light rail. At the end of the bridge, we switch onto the inbound track, then pull onto a single-tracked modern bridge that climbs steeply away from the river. This is the beginning of the Allentown branch. We pass underneath the Liberty Bridge, a steel cantilever road bridge opened in 1928, then continue the climb until we reach Arlington Avenue. We'll be street running from here almost all the way to South Hills Junction, and it's here along this stretch that we reach the steepest grade on the Pittsburgh light rail, at about 10%. Trees and houses prevent us from seeing much as we climb, until suddenly, incline-esque views open up before us, and we can see across the Monongahela to Oakland and points beyond. It's hard to see it as we pass it only briefly, but at one point you can see a staircase heading down the mountain from Arlington Avenue. This is Bering Street, which despite being a narrow pedestrian staircase, is legally considered a street in the city of Pittsburgh. We're now passing through the heart of Allentown, a neighborhood that shares a name with Pennsylvania's third largest city, to the confusion of outsiders and the annoyance of locals. Just behind these buildings one can find the Knoxville Incline Overlook Park. This was built out of the remains of the Knoxville Incline, a passenger incline that, unusually for Pittsburgh, went around a curve. This may be one of the only instances of a funicular becoming a very steep rail trail. We turn onto Warrington Avenue, having hit the highest point on our trip, and glide down through Beltzhoover, named for 19th century German merchant Melchior Beltzhoover. When the neighborhood was first developed, Warrington Avenue was the main road to Washington, Pennsylvania, and thus the land along it was valuable property. Some of its streets are named after one of its developers' children. Today, this predominantly African-American neighborhood has been considered an urban revitalization success, with an attractive main street and decreasing crime over the past 10 years. At last, we're turning off of Warrington and heading down the hill to South Hills Junction, where we meet up with the rest of the light rail tracks. You can see an old PCC turning loop as we pass the junction, and behind our platforms, there's another set that used to serve trolleys on the Overbrook branch, but which are mostly disused now. Our train pulls out of the station on its regular route once again, and we head across the platform to catch another train back into the city. This time, our view is out the back, so we can fully appreciate the hairpin turns we're about to take, as well as how our 90-foot light rail vehicle navigates windy city streets with mixed traffic. It's unclear whether Northside or Allentown had the first electric street railway in Pittsburgh, but in one form or another, this line has been in operation for over 100 years, and for many years, played host to PCC streetcars. Warrington Avenue was rebuilt in the 1980s, nicely timed with the initial construction of Pittsburgh's light rail, and local grassroots efforts persuaded Pittsburgh Regional Transit, called Port Authority at the time, to lay new rails on the Allentown branch and keep trolleys running. The 52 Allentown streetcar service that ran this route operated first with PCCs, and then with light rail vehicles, and it was renamed the Brown Line in 2010. It ran between South Hills Junction and Gateway Station, serving 10 request stops along Allentown and Warrington Avenues. As time went on, ridership and service dropped, and trains only ran at rush hour. In 2011, the services were cancelled altogether. Now the only trains that run here are deviation services, and they don't make stops anywhere along the route. You can keep up with PRT's alerts on Twitter, or X, to see when trains will be operating over the branch. It's a lot of fun to ride. But in the future, You might be able to ride this track more often. PRT's 25-year plan from 2021 includes the possibility of bringing the line back, citing the revitalization of the Mount Washington neighborhood it serves. Time will tell if this will be implemented, perhaps as a modern streetcar with low floors. Now wouldn't that be cool? As for us, we're coming to the end of our journey, as we make our way back onto the Panhandle Bridge to downtown. We've just enjoyed some light rail views that few Pittsburghers are afforded these days. But hey, the normal light rail views are pretty cool too, don't you think? I'll definitely miss this, as I'm traveling across the world next week, but that's a story for another time.